Welcome to the Recovery Lab. This is episode 3, so you guys, like I said, are in our 3rd episode.
Happy to be here.
We're really glad to have you guys. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background information about yourself, if you don't mind.
I'll go first, huh? Okay, well, my name's Rhiannan, and I'm sort of just winging it in this whole, I guess you would refer to it as advocacy. So no organized structure, no anything. I'm just going
But
for
you
it.
have a little bit of a background, right?
I
So
do,
tell us a
yeah.
little bit about how you got, well, we'll get into that in just a second. Let's let Joelyn go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead and
I'm Joelyn Raby. I live in West Frankfort, and I too have no structure other than I paired my going on abouts with Mike Tyson to create structure so people would accept it more readily.
There you go.
Because, I just go about doing my thing, like what you're talking about. I don't worry about, who I'm associated with, which, I kind of do.
I get it. So to provide a little bit of context to everybody that doesn't know, Joelyn is heavily involved in our organization, Take Action Today. She serves as our recovery or as our community resource director. And what she does is she helps to build networks, not only in our community, which is we're all based in West Frankfort. Okay, we serve Jefferson, Williamson, Franklin, and Perry counties, but our organization started out in Franklin County. We started out as a group of citizens wanting to create change in our community. We were all a little bit tired of seeing our community basically rot from the inside out. We were tired of whitewashing things and decided, instead of just complaining about our community, we decided to all get active. That is how our organization Take Action Today came about. Was Joelyn and I started talking. We met with about 8 or 9 other individuals, people with lived experience from homelessness and substance use around West Frankfort and around Franklin County, and we decided to start an action group. And from that, we ended up growing this into what we refer to as a recovery community organization, which we're an organization built and based on people with lived experience, whether that be personal or through family connections, in substance use or homelessness, or as we discovered in our last episode, a lot of trauma issues. So kind of what we hope to do is kind of peel back the veil a little bit of today and kind of reveal some of the things that are going on in our community of West Frankfort to kind of show what spurred us into action. Now, Ms. Caraway, you're kind of being a little humble about yourself. So you have a little bit of a background in treatment and in social services.
Right.
And what does that consist of?
I was with Centerstone for about 3 years in the early intervention program, which doesn't directly tie in with this, but indirectly it does, because many of those kids come from disadvantaged homes with substance abuse issues, the whole gamut of things that would lead a child to need services to push them toward normal learning, behavioral. One of the things that we provided was behavioral therapy, things like that they weren't necessarily getting at home. So it indirectly does tie in to what we're talking about. And I did that for 3 years, and then the program was cut from Centerstone. So that left me, just kind of standing around thinking, what am I going to do to fill my time? And this has filled my time.
Well, you have an interesting hobby.
That's true. That is true.
I think one of the things that I find about West Frankfort that's really interesting to me is that we have a massive behavioral health, mental health organization in our community, and yet the community continues to suffer major problems of substance use, major problems with people experiencing homelessness, behavioral issues, mental health issues. And we have people there that are working, not to denigrate anything that they're doing, because I believe that they're well intentioned in doing stuff. But even in a small community of less than 8,000 people with a major organization there, we're still having a lot of issues.
I think the reason for that is what our community lacked before is people on the ground getting those people to the resources.
Okay.
So it's lucky that we have that place like Centerstone and, you know, Crosswalk in our town, but we have to be the people that are on the ground, meeting the people face to face, getting to know them and saying, okay, this is what you need and these are the places that we can take you to. And that's what I spend most of my time doing, is finding out what's around, what's available, what would fit with a certain person, because they really don't know. And it's a lot of work to get somebody into that kind of organization. You know, they can just walk in on the street and then get help, but if they don't have a group of people supporting them to do that, it's really just, you know, so really those organizations need organizations like ours to help them do what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Because it's a lot, you know, like there's a lot to it, and a lot of people just don't know where to start. They, you know, find themselves either on drugs or like homeless or like in need of mental services, whatever, and they don't know what to do with it. They don't have people to walk alongside them. And I think for me, that's what I like to do. Not necessarily organize, that's not really my skill set, but I like to find people and help them get to where they need to be. That's what I think. I think that's why why there's just a gap. There's a gap between the services available and people willing to help. You know, all day long on Talk West Frankfurt or on these websites, it's people complaining about doing something. Something needs to be done. Something needs to be done. And it's like, there are plenty of things that you can do instead of complaining.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I was one of those people for a long time. So I've lived in the community for about 15 years. My wife grew up in West Frankfurt. We moved here right before I started working in the coal mines. We moved back up here. And I went to work in the mines, even though I came out of, this is about, let's see here, 2005. So I'm about 5 years removed from my heavy drug use and my homelessness years. So all of that stuff should have still been pretty fresh in my mind. But I get in my job at the coal mine, making great money, driving back and forth to work. I became absolutely oblivious to the same people that were experiencing the same things that I came out of. And what makes it even worse is that when I got saved and entered recovery, I got heavily involved in ministry, and I knew that my calling was to help those people. And I started driving back and forth to work with my head down, ignoring the people digging through dumpsters, ignoring the people moving around. When I saw a guy walking down the road at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was like, oh man, there goes a meth head. He's out still up from last night. Instead of thinking that, no, this guy probably just folded his tent up and he's moving to a different location so he doesn't get harassed.
Probably both.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both.
Probably both.
So about a year ago, when the homeless gentleman passed away, and I remember his name just as clear as day. That kind of spurred us having a Thanksgiving dinner last year. Until that point, getting involved in our community, I just ignored everything. I went to church and I went to work and I had my head down, which is what a lot of people in our community do. They're doing well. Their families are doing well. Some of them really are just barely surviving, but they think that they're doing well, and so they don't pay attention to people. So that's what we want to do, is we want to call attention to people and then bridge those gaps like you talked of. I think that when we first started building this organization, one of the things you shared with me was how people would stop by your house all the time. Just walking down the road would stop and kind of talk to you guys, and you and Jonathan would connect with them. I think you and Jonathan have your fingers in our community pretty well with some of the locals through your shop and through some of the music stuff that you guys have done. So let's talk about some of those gaps. Let's talk about those gaps.
The gaps, or talking about the difference. So I think that we definitely have, a presence in the community, but I think that our presence in that community is really just been building trust with people.
Right.
Without any kind of, literally I work in my yard a lot, and so people walk by constantly. I live in what our fire department would consider the DMZ. It's just like a war zone kind of. It's gotten a lot better, honestly, but it's all night long. it's like the Vegas Strip, people just walking back and forth to the gas station, and like, yeah, I don't know where you live, but I mean, it's just all night long. And so because of my personal relationships with like some of my family, I've gotten to know hundreds of these people, and you know, I never want to be the kind of person that just is, I don't know, I just always wanted to be a friend and, you know, be a trusting source, whether they want to stay where they are or if they want to get help. Like, I'm just a friend. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to do, and I think why so many people just don't do anything. You know, they just want to go to work, come home, and hope to God somebody's going to do something about the people in their backyard.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if I called the law every time there was somebody in my backyard or hiding up against my shed for no reason, you could see them. I mean, it's crazy, you know, not to say I haven't had to call. I have. There have been crazy things happen where I'm like, okay, you know, but, and I don't even get to know all of them. It's just not being rude when you encounter somebody. I don't know, there's just a lot to it, like, to me.
What type of, so some of the people that are stopping by your house, what type of issues are they facing?
Most of the people that well, one girl in particular, she wasn't at my house. She was across the street. She was sleeping under a tree for like a week in an abandoned house. So there was like an abandoned house and then this tree. And so me and my neighbor were like watching her, making sure she was alive every day. You know, asking if she needed anything, just checking on her, not, you know, being like, here, come stay at my house, or like, let me do this for you, because you really can't do things for people unless they want help. But you can be a person that they can talk to if they want to. And she was there for probably a week and a half, and then she disappeared. And I've seen her like, you know, randomly. So I don't even know her name. She never told me. She pretty much resisted any kind of help that we tried, but you know, that's not uncommon. You know, I don't think you'd realize the houses, every other house in West Frankfurt's like empty. So it's like, look in their backyard. Like there may be somebody. And it was hot, and like, you know, my neighbor gave her some food, and it's just little things like that. She was nonviolent, you know. I don't think a lot of it is not violent. I never, like occasionally you're gonna hear like fighting and screaming, but usually they're just doing their thing, living in their underground world. You know, they don't even realize until they come out into the light that they're living in a bad way. I mean, they know it, but they can conceal it because it's so much of a problem in our town that it's normal, because like a huge part of the population is living this way, so they can just, you know, kind of go unnoticed. So like for me, I like to pop in and just remind them, like, there's a whole other world going on out here. Other people that have came by, I mean, people that I know, it's just those connections that I built with individuals.
Absolutely.
It's not like just random strangers. It's like my husband or I would know them.
This is our community. These are people. These are people that we know. Yeah, these are family members of people that we know.
Yeah, and so
I know a couple of people that you have mentioned that stopped by your house are family members of ours.
Right, and just, you know, being there, like, hey, if you need anything, you need to talk. You know, I had one guy who, I mean, sometimes if I had work to do, I'd let him do some work for me. Sad, you know, I mean, wanting to do better, but at the same time, like, really just needed a friend. And didn't need somebody saying, you need to get sober, you need to get sober, you need to get out of this mess. Is that true? Yeah. Does he need to be sober? Yeah. But I don't always have to be the person to do that. I can just be the person that's like, how are you?
Right.
There's that YouTube video or like a TED Talk, and I think we've talked about it, about this mouse city. Mouse Park. And it like really is amazing. I had already believed that way before I watched it, so that just kind of reinforced my own thought. But basically the idea is that like they would put a mouse in a cage, and they would give the mouse 2 water bottles. One would have cocaine in it, one of it would not. And the mouse that was alone in the cage would die because it wouldn't be able to stop drinking the cocaine water. It would kill itself every time, over and over. But then they built this mouse park that had everything a mouse could possibly want, and still gave them those 2 options of cocaine water and just regular water. And almost none of the mice kept going back to the cocaine water. They would like go and like they would try it, and then maybe some of them would go back a couple times, but like for the most part they didn't need it because they had everything they wanted. And so like building communities is not isolating people who are hurting, but bringing them in by inviting them into your world. Like maybe not to your dinner table if you're not comfortable with that, but like just being a friend, not isolating them. And that can be very hard, especially if you're dealing with family. I understand that. Like, I do understand that a lot of people have tried everything to help their loved one, and it's nothing but pain and agony. I get that.
Right. So just to interrupt you a little bit. So you talk about the pain that the family members, okay, and this is nothing against your comment a while ago, because I think that it's a common misconception, and I think you're going to get this once I say it, because I think you already do, is that we hear people repeat the phrase a lot that they have to want recovery, they have to want to change their life, and in a lot of ways that's very true. Obviously, what we all think of is part of it's true, but most of those people don't want to be like that.
True.
I know when I was in the worst of my addiction, and even in the best of my addiction, I didn't want to be that way. I went through repeated programs, and every time I went through a program, I wanted to change. I wanted my life to be better, and it still ended up going back to the life that I lived before. And what I've come to, and I didn't realize this until a week ago, that somebody mentioned in a class to me, and then we started a conversation, and I had like a week-long conversation with this guy about changing the conversation from people having a desire or wanting to change to people being ready to change, changing the conversation from being willing to change to being ready to change, and that's what we do through our organization. Is that we, as we've talked about before with that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, meeting those basic needs until we get a person settled in housing, until a person doesn't have to worry about their next meal. They're going to want to recover, but they're just not going to be ready for it. So as we come in and we meet some of those basic needs, as we give that connection, I love that you bring up the TED Talk. That's one of my favorite TED Talks ever.
Too.
And what it is, I believe the title of it is Everything You Know About Addiction is Wrong.
Right.
Or What If Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong. And that TED Talk was so motivational to me. I founded this organization on that video because we want to provide that connection that gentleman talks about. And I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his name because I'll butcher the last name.
I don't.
But it's a great TED Talk. I encourage anybody to watch it. We show that video to everybody that first wants to get involved in our organization, because we want people to understand how important that connection is, because that is what a lot of these people that experience substance use and experience homelessness feel. They feel disconnected.
Because honestly, the traditional teaching for families dealing with people on drugs is to isolate them, withdraw your care from them. And you can love them from a distance, but separate yourself from them because they need to feel the pain of what it's like losing their family.
Right.
That is what's been taught.
Yes.
I've been to...
We see it on Intervention. You watch Intervention and that's what you see.
Yeah,
that fear, that threat. You're going to lose your family.
Yes.
Well, man, these people have already lost everything.
Lost everything.
We talked about it on the last episode that I started getting in trouble when I was 15 years old. The late 80s, early 90s. Tough love was all the rage.
Yeah.
My father was a police officer, so my parents did what they thought was best for me, which was basically show that tough love. And for all intents and purposes, handed me over to a juvenile justice system.
They did what they thought was
because
the right
they thought
thing.
it was right. Yep, and I don't begrudge them for it. But now looking back, I think we know that approach doesn't work. That you do have to be hard with people on substance use, and you do not need to enable them. There's a huge difference between enabling and empowering. And what we want to do is help empower people, not enable them. But we get caught in that mentality because we were taught that for so long that you just cut them off. Well, they're already cut off from their they probably already lost their job, so they're disconnected from that. Then they become disconnected from the community because now they become that person that you just ride by and ignore. They become disconnected from their family, disconnected from their friends, and eventually disconnected from community, from reality, from life. and reestablishing that connection in people's life is so important. That's why it is so great, some of the things that both of you women are doing in our community, with you going to Gray Plaza, where almost nobody is going. You might see what I've heard people refer to as turkey people. Do you know what I mean? You ever heard that phrase before? Those
No.
people that show up to give out turkeys on Thanksgiving and then you never see them the rest of the year.
Yeah.
You know, so those people experience a lot of
I'm
that.
thinking, what?
Yeah, I mean, that's true, though. That is-
But you get it though?
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, it scratches the itch if I need to help somebody, so this is what I do.
Exactly.
And no, like, whatever, do what
There's
you
no
have the
commitment,
capacity to
though.
do.
Yeah.
But somebody's got to do more.
Right.
you
Yeah,
know,
the person
and-
receiving that meal doesn't really care that
Right.
you're there to fill your own ego.
Right.
They're just glad to get a meal.
Yeah.
I don't mean
But-
that rude. That sounds kind of rude, but I mean it's true.
It's
Well, it's
not.
true.
It's not rude. It's just a rude awakening. People
Yeah.
don't
Right.
look at it that way. And
Oh,
it
I
needs,
serve this,
right,
that, and
right,
that. and-
exactly.
But
And
if
that's
it
what we
really
wanna-
inconveniences us,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or it doesn't meet, or it doesn't fit into my narrow idea of what I should be doing, you know, or they just don't want it.
but too, I'm not gonna be so rude, but also everybody can do what they can with what they have.
Oh,
So it's like,
absolutely. It's important.
If that's all you can do, if you're doing it for the right reason and you're doing it with your whole heart and with the Lord, then like do that thing.
Absolutely,
Even
do
if it's
it.
one thing.
Regardless
like, don't
of-
not do anything because of that. But
Yeah,
some
regardless of
people,
your
it's
intention,
just-
do it anyway because that person receiving that meal
Right.
doesn't care. They need
Right.
that meal.
True.
You know, and the rest of that stuff is just on you. But it's so important to give them that connection back. And that's one of the big things that we want to do through this organization is build a positive, vibrant community for people seeking recovery to connect to. We want to design social events and things that people in recovery don't have to go into the basement of a church to talk about their issues. They can now
Yes.
start talking to them in groups of friends
Right.
because more than likely their friend is suffering from the same thing, you know. And so we want to
Or they can meet people who are trying to go through the same thing without meeting people who are trying to sell them drugs, which happens
Right.
a lot in recovery meetings.
Oh, I know. I've heard a lot of people tell me that the first thing they do in a new community is go to an NA meeting because they know that's where they'll find their drugs.
Oh wow.
You know, it seems counterintuitive, but it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
You know, if you think about it, because I mean, there's a lot of people out there going through the motions in recovery programs. I saw it in Teen Challenge. I was in a 15-month program, secluded from everything in life, and 90% of the people were in there playing games, weren't in there to recover. You know, very few of us were. You know, and you saw that bear out in the people that came out afterwards.
Wow.
But so talk about some of the things that you're seeing over at the Gray Plaza.
Oh, I see everything.
I bet.
Well, so basically, how this all kind of came about was when I was volunteering with Night into Noonday, and it was real strange how it happened. Actually, a couple of guys came in one day, and it was like the Lord just spotlighted them and said, "Go to them and invest time in them." And it was like, all right, I don't know what that entails, but okay. So that's what I did. I just went to them individually, just talked to them, like you were talking about, just investing time and energy into them because they live in a totally separate reality.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure
and I don't think most people realize that
they
they
don't.
do.
It's and I'm seeing it now that I'm spending time out there. It's completely disconnected from actual reality. It's their
Right.
own separate set of rules, their own set of laws, completely different. So these two guys, I just started every week just, going straight to them, opening the door for them, even just small things like that to make them feel, because a lot of the times when people come into outreaches like that, they're ashamed. They need the stuff,
Yeah.
but they're embarrassed. They're ashamed.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good topic with shame. I mean, I think we
There's a
could build a
ton of
whole
it.
show around that,
Yes.
around shame and stigma with
Yes.
preventing people from reaching out to get the
Right.
help.
And I hear that all the time, so I would just go and open the door for them and welcome them in. And each week I would just go to them, how was your week, this and that, and just started putting time, resources also, but the time. And when you invest that time and energy into them, they begin to trust, because there's a huge trust issue in that community too, because they'll steal from each other.
Right.
Both of those guys lost everything they had because other homeless people stole their stuff. And
Yeah.
it was like, is
And
there
it
no
happens
code of
over
conduct?
and no,
There's
there's not.
not.
Not like back in the day.
No, and that surprised me. I thought, I mean, they're all in the same boat. You would think that, but they don't.
It's survival mode.
It is.
When you live and operate. So, and we didn't really get to touch on it when we touched on trauma, but operating in that survival mode, operating from a place of trauma, it rewires your brain.
Yes.
We know now through science and looking at fMRIs that it literally rewires your brain. It literally changes the structure of your brain and reroutes the neural network in our minds, which shapes who we are. You know, so we see loss in brain mass. You know, so it becomes harder for people. They're not only dealing with damage from the substance use, but they're dealing with the emotional damage that causes their brain to shrink, and then we expect them to try to make rational decisions out of a brain that already has limited capacity.
Right.
But as you say, as soon as we start making that connection with a person, they grow at a rapid rate.
Oh, yes.
Even inside their mind, those neural networks start to fire at a rapid rate, rebuilding, rerouting systems, and that if they can keep up that connection over time, just like wiring the brain for addiction takes time. Wiring the brain for recovery also takes time, but it happens. Those brains can restructure to where a person can actually become more geared towards recovery. But it takes getting them from that starting point. And so many people are starting from such a deep hole and then don't have the assistance that they need to help just get them started. Because if you can get a person a year or two down the road, then they can start doing things on their own.
Right.
Hopefully one of our long-term goals is to have a residential facility. And that's what we want to do, is operate a 2-year transitional housing facility where it's not a 30 or 60 or a 90-day process, because all that does is just detox the body. It doesn't start working on the neural network. It doesn't start reshaping people's behavior and mindsets. But over a 2-year period, we can do that. But obviously, in the situation that you guys are working in, that's not possible. We have to do it over a much slower process. We do what we can, just like the turkey people. We do what we can, you know, and to establish those connections. Let's back up just a little bit and talk about Night to Noonday. So that is a ministry in West Frankfort that is geared towards homeless people,
Right.
correct? Tell us a little bit about that.
So on Thursdays, right now it's just Thursdays. I think they're hoping to, have it available more days of the week. But they serve a hot lunch. Thursdays, it's supposed to be 11 to 12:30, but it has exploded so much.
I bet.
that
Well, the need is
it's-
massive. I think
yes.
they really talking to them last year. I think they really underestimated their need,
Oh,
the
yeah.
need in our community.
Oh, for sure.
And that's kind of one of the things that we do as advocates,
Right.
is make people aware of the needs in our community. Because I think if you remember when we started talking about this, we literally thought there was 25 homeless people in West Frankfort, 15
Well, so
homeless people.
You came to me and you said, well, this group over here thinks that there's 12, and I'm like, I know like at least 30 people.
Right.
Like, I mean,
Right.
maybe they're not living on the street, but they're
There's
going
no
from house to
permanent,
house
right.
Yeah.
to house.
Well,
And,
because
I mean,
that
it's
was
more
my
and more.
mentality too, because I was so isolated in my world. And I think that a lot of people, well-intentioned people that want to reach this demographic, I think that they just don't have a real concept of the enormity of the issue.
How many did they serve last week? Was it like 30 or 60? It was.
This past Thursday, it was 36, I believe.
Yeah.
And that exploded from the first week I was there a couple of months ago. There was like 12, and then one week there was like 8, and now it's up to pushing 40 because the word travels. They go back to their their little community, and not everybody that comes in there is truly homeless. But they don't only serve the
Right,
homeless.
sure, yeah.
It's anybody who's in need of a hot meal and personal care items.
I think our community needs a soup kitchen badly,
Right.
because I think we could
I
feed
agree.
people on that level,
I agree.
at least 50 people a day,
Yes.
every day of the week.
I agree.
If not more, depending on that. I think that the Heron House of Hope
Yeah.
over in Heron with John Steves, they've got a great model
Yeah.
that I would like to install in West Frankfort one day
It's
when we
very
get to that point, because the need, we know the need's there
Right.
now, and I think that's been the big thing for me over the last years, learning how big the need was. I really thought there was only maybe 12, 15 homeless people. Nobody comes by my house. I live in a different neighborhood. People
you
don't.
live at like you live on a weird.
Yeah, we live
road
kind of
where-
isolated. So even
Yeah.
though, so like a block from my house, there's a lot of people walking between the housing and the convenience stores, but they don't get over onto my block. So
They come
So-
right through my yard. Literally.
well, exactly,
Yeah.
dude. Man, I used to make people so mad by cutting through their yard. Me and my friends, we walked everything when we were younger too, and we cut through people's yards. But I was so isolated, and I think that a lot of our churches are that way. I think that they're isolated. A term that I've heard recently is a silo effect, which we see with agencies. You know, like we see Centerstone working in West Frankfort, you know, but they don't get outside of Centerstone. They reach the edge of their structure and then they stop. Well, what happens after that? You know, a person goes to a 90-day detox and they get out. As far as the detox is concerned, they've done their job. Well, what happens to the person after that?
That's why you have to have a network.
That's why we need a recovery community, because so that we can fill that gap in. So you get churches too. Churches also reach the edge of what they're structured to do.
Right,
You know?
and that's one of the things, like when I first started taking on this role of resourcing, I was actually kind of amazed at the amount of churches in our town, in Franklin County, that do something.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Nobody told me, you know, I didn't realize that they were giving out food on this day, that they were doing hot meals on this day, that you
Trinity
could get
does a ton of that
clothes
stuff.
on this day, you could get, you know, all kinds of stuff, and I didn't even know. And I think that now realizing that if we had a central place where, okay, these are all the things that are going on, which is what we're working on right now, it's so much better because then you get people to the things that they need.
Right.
And then
Yes.
you don't have to have the reinvention of the wheel. You know,
Right.
it's like, okay, this place is doing that. We're just going to source people to there. And then this place is doing that. Now, Marion, they have a better community like this. They have, you
Well,
know,
they've got a much larger, much wealthier community.
right. They have, you know, they've got people who've been working this for a long time, but in Franklin County, it just doesn't seem that way. And if it is, let me know. Because I feel like there are people who want to help, but they don't
Absolutely.
know where to go. They don't know. They don't want to. They get all weirded out because we have some people who start something and then it goes south and it's like whatever. But a trusting network that's not necessarily denominational. That's not just. But how can we just be that community source for people to just go? And I think that, you know, I think it's working. You know, I know for me,
I think it is
the
too.
people I've been able to direct, you know, I don't necessarily have to take them to there, but I could say, hey, this is this and that. And when they're ready and they really need, like one of my favorite things about Take Action Today is the 5-year commitment, which is a number.
Yeah, it's just a
Maybe
number, but
maybe
it's
it won't take 5 years, but the idea that we would be invested in the long term of a person because it's going to take time for the brain.
Absolutely.
It's going to take time for them to get out of survival mode into, you know, these other realms in their world. And like, I am that way. Like, I'm a for lifer. I have been saying that since I was a teenager. Like, unless you just don't want to be my friend, like, I may not call you all the time, but I'm not going to just assume that we didn't talk so you don't like me anymore. I'm not that way. Like, I'm for lifer with any person that I meet on the street. There's never a time where I'm going to go, I'm just done, you know. And I remember, this is just like my own personal thing, like I just had this realization in that realm. I feel like the Lord told me, or I just witnessed it, I don't know. He said, I never leave you. So why do we automatically think when as a Christian that we have permission to leave people? Now, building, like making some boundaries, like that stuff's important. I'm not saying don't do
Yeah,
that.
boundaries are important, but
Boundaries are important. Like, I'm not saying just like keep giving a person, but like the emotional, like that support, like if we lean into that, not in my strength, but in His strength,
right.
you know, we don't have to leave a person. We don't have to, you know, it's literally like them saying, like, how many times do we have to forgive? And He's like, you know,
As many times
As
as we
many
should sing
times.
the Ocean's Chorus.
right. I mean, it's like you don't, like, because, you know, at the end of the day, my life is not my own. And maybe you don't have that same viewpoint, but I do. And my life doesn't belong to me. And I don't have to be convenienced, you know, I can give up lots of things because of the cross, because he's empowered me to do that. I don't necessarily have to, you know, think about me. You know, the Holy Spirit is constantly reminding me it isn't about you. And especially with personal relationships in this subject, it has been something I have learned over like, you know, 10, I don't know, long time, my whole life, I feel like, where I have learned a different thing in a different season, but like really just at the end of the day, it's not about me. So
No,
what
it's
your
about-
actions do, like if it's affecting me, that's my fault, not yours.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to tell me how to feel. And, you know, if I'm walking with God, and not to say that I don't deal with things, I definitely do, but I take them to Him and allow Him to teach me how to love, even though you really just hurt me. Oh, you really just stole $500 from me. Most people say, never coming into my house again. I hear it all the time. But you know what? I'm like, come have dinner.
Yeah.
I get it. You know, not an open pocketbook kind of thing, like where it's okay.
No,
but
but
don't you?
there's-
But what does the scripture say? You've got a Bible over there where it's like, you know, your goodness is going to basically bring the condemnation, not condemnation, but just bring that person to be like Jesus never leaves.
Right.
He's our model.
Yep. I think you touched on something real important in there was having the heart of a servant, putting other people's needs before your own. I think it's so important, and I think it's kind of where we got lost in as you pointed out earlier, Western Christianity, where we started putting our needs ahead of the needs of others, and that's kind of a lot to say about our society, where we've become more of an individualistic society, and then we've taken that into our spirituality as well. But that's not the way a servant works. You know, that's not the way a Christian servant especially works. I know for me, this is not me. Working in this field is not me.
Me either.
Until last summer, I wanted to be a softball coach. I wasn't good at it, but that's what I wanted to be. And even I laugh at people. I laugh telling people all the time that I am the only person I know spending an enormous amount of money to get a college education in something that I will make less money than I make now. But I feel called to it, and that really is the it. That's the end right there, because a long time ago I made a commitment to God that said, and I told God that if He would save my life, that I would give it to Him. And He called me on that about a year ago in church one day. And our church is not a strong charismatic church. I tell people all the time that we're basic.
He told me that one day. He's like, "Oh, come to my church. It's the most basic." I'm like, "Do you know where I've been?"
But God
So
still
alluring.
But God still spoke to me. I love my church, and
Yeah, you have a great church.
that basicness is what I like about
Right,
it.
I know.
Because it's so balanced. But God spoke to me, and He said that, you know, remember that commitment you made to me in the back seat of that car. He says, "Well, are you still committed?" Of course. And I'm like, "Well, yeah." You know. But, so getting outside of ourselves, dying to ourselves, putting others before us, you know, and still having barriers, not barriers but boundaries.
I don't even know that like I'm called to this work, but I do know that every day I'm called to do what's in front of me. And like personally, like, do I think that this is my whole life? No. Like one day I hope to be somewhere beautiful, you know.
Everything happens in a season.
But it's like while I'm here, while I'm in this day, while I'm at this building, well, you know, my building's very old, and it's like, is this like we're so called to make this 100-year-old building something? No.
You know how many
It's just
pictures
like,
I've
but
seen
we're
lately with
here.
that 100-year-old building in it?
It's like we're here, so why not do something while we're here? Why not be, you know, why not make things better than what? So instead of just doing nothing, and I really don't put that pressure on everybody, because I don't think everybody's equipped mentally or should do it. I really feel like everybody has to follow their own conviction, and that's Jonathan and I. You know, there was a season of our life where we literally like. I mean, we had everything stripped, and it was fine. I knew it wasn't forever, but it's like, whatever it is, if it's like, you know, something glorious and beautiful and pretty, like, okay. But if it's something messy and ugly and stinky or whatever, like, okay. And I feel like for me, I've just come to that, being okay with doing something every day, you know,
Right.
like, not that I'm flaky,
Yeah.
because I don't think that, like, I'm committed to things to the end. Like I said, I'm a for lifer, but,
Well, you have to know when, you've got to know when it's time to move on.
Right.
Things happen in seasons. I mean,
Exactly.
and you have to know when to break that and move on to something else.
and you have to do it, and with my conviction, when the Lord gives you direction.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can't, if I did everything that there was a need for, I mean, it's just impossible. I can
Right.
only be responsible for what's in front of me.
So I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about our community being full of people that want to help.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were putting together our Thanksgiving lunch last year, that was an observation that I made. People were falling all over themselves to help,
Right.
but what they lacked was leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So many times I heard from people, even people in church positions of leadership, say they didn't know what to do.
Right.
We want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And that was kind of what spurred our organization too, was I saw that there were so many people that wanted to do something, that were sick of watching their community decay, but they didn't know what to do.
Right.
That we wanted to build an organization. That was why we formed our board early this year, was to provide that leadership to our community. And now it's grown from our community because we're such an awesome organization, you know, or maybe we just can't do things normally like normal people. But anyway, but to provide that leadership for people and to give them an avenue that they can get involved with and volunteer with. And that is volunteering in your community and helping your community. Going from a place of complaining, which is where I was. I complained about everybody in our community, especially as a softball coach, because I saw the parents that didn't come to practice, that used us as a babysitting service. I saw the kids coming to practice with almost nothing.
Listen, I told my kids if they wanted to do baseball or softball, they'd be going without me. So that ain't always
No,
the case.
no.
But I'm not sitting in the blazing sun.
But no, that's not what I'm talking about, though. You know the type of people that I'm talking
I
about.
do. Yeah.
You know, because the type of parent that can't buy their kid a glove but can go out and buy 2 cartons of cigarettes and a 12-pack of Keystone Ice, you know, and sit at the ballpark and watch their kid practice, you know. And I completely lost my train of thought where I was going with that.
Well, I wanted to say one thing about what you were talking about.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
No, it's
about
okay.
about volunteer. Never mind. Go
Volunteering.
ahead.
No, some people, like, it's in human nature
Yeah.
to need to be told what to do. So you
Yeah.
have all these people who want to do something, but nobody's telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And see, I learned that that's not what Jesus did for us.
Right.
That's what we used to do. We used
Yeah.
to need to be told, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that.
Right.
But when he revealed to me, no, that's not how it works anymore. You don't have to be told what to do.
Yeah.
You know, the grace is that empowerment to not do those things.
Right.
And so when it comes to even something as simple as that, my pastor of our church that isn't a thing anymore, was super great about this. Like, he's a visionary. Like, there was all this, like, people having great ideas. And, you know, he would just look at them and go, that's great. Anything you need, I'll help.
Yeah.
And it's like, we want to say, like, this needs done and that needs done, but do it.
Right.
You know, do it.
I
Like,
think that
nobody's
that's where-
stopping you. I mean, it's a green light most of the time. Like, do it. And if it fails, okay, whatever, you know, like, okay.
I think
know,
that
so
you
it's
touch
like,
on something that we have, an issue we have in our church.
Oh, yeah.
An issue between the difference between being enabled by our leadership and being empowered by our leadership. We're so used to our leadership telling us what to do, and we want that role. We don't want to have to do it ourselves.
Right.
We don't, you know. But the gospel and what our organization does is what we want to do is empower people. So, like, I had a gentleman call me last night with a guy at a Celebrate Recovery meeting, needed to get into a shelter, and this was the second time this gentleman had called me this week, which I absolutely love. But the first time I told him, I said, I'll call them for you, and I will make sure they have bed space and everything for you. Well, this time I told the guy, I said, I gave you the number the other day. I said, all you have to do is just call them.
Right.
You know, it will go a lot farther if you call them.
Right.
Because, and to me, that's what leadership is. Leadership isn't telling people what to do.
Right.
It's modeling for them what to do and then giving them the opportunity to do it.
Right.
One of the biggest things that I get out of my recovery and through this organization is giving back. That in 12-step programs, it's called the 12-step. The 12th step, you know, I have recovered my life, and now I'm going to go help somebody else. They call it carrying the message to those out there that are still suffering. That is so crucial to successful recovery.
Right.
But we also have that in the church as Christians. To be successful Christians, we have to give to others. We have to do things. To be successful community members, you have to volunteer in your community because it gives you a sense of ownership. It gives you a sense of being involved and buy-in. So we wanted to provide opportunity for people in recovery and in churches to volunteer and do outreaches and to give an opportunity to women like yourself and men that want to reach out and change their community. We wanted to provide a structure that they could do that in, that they could come and find people that were working towards the same goal, who might know somebody else, who might know somebody, and it's all about building that community and that network. So we've talked a little bit about some of the issues that our community faces and a little bit about some of our ideas. What are some things that we can do as an organization to start helping? What are some things that we can do not only to help our community better understand the needs, but also to help the people with the needs? Because we're kind of working on two fronts.
Are you talking about things that these people don't know, or like things that we're already doing? Or are you wanting like new ideas?
Just ideas.
Oh,
Just give me some ideas that, there's going to be people that are going to listen to this. And then for ourselves, for our organization, what can we do as an organization? You're working at the Gray Plaza. You're working with people that are in the circumstances that we want to help change. What can we do as an organization, as people that have connections, that we have meager resources, we have people with resources. What can we do to reach people and to help change their lives?
Well, first of all, out there, a lot of those people are transient. I mean, they aren't at the moment technically homeless because they have a roof over their head, but it's temporary, most of them. A couple of them that I've been, hanging out with, I guess you want to call it, because you're
That's
putting
the
time
best
into
way.
them. What do you call it?
Well, that's that connection.
Right, exactly.
That's what they need.
A couple of them do full-time live there, and they have for years. But most of them, it's like, am I going to be able to scrape up enough money to stay another week? If not, I'm going back to my tent. And so I would say a big thing is, and this is not a problem that any one organization can tackle, but it's a huge problem, is the housing situation, because a lot of these people have a record. They can't get into a shelter, and they can't get into housing because they have a record. So it's a cycle where
most people don't
permanently-
realize how much of an
Right.
obstacle that criminal record is.
Exactly.
I hear people throw that around all the time, and then in the same breath they'll talk about locking somebody up over stealing
Right.
a bike, and they do not realize how
Right.
much that perpetuates the cycle, because
Right.
you get people caught in that cycle of going to jail. You can't keep a steady job if you're going to jail. If you can't keep a steady job, you can't keep housing, you can't keep food, so you're going to go steal somebody's bicycle.
And that's what's happening.
Yes.
And the problem is, one of the guys I've been hanging out with here lately, his thing is, most of his record occurred like in the 90s, years and years ago. And to me, it's not fair to lump somebody who had a domestic in 1996 in with somebody who had one 2 weeks ago. You know what I mean? There's a disadvantage for people who are not where they need to be, but are certainly not where they were 25 years ago. And they're perpetually just living literally under a tree because they can't get into even a shelter.
So one of the things that I'm like in this whole thing, getting to know the people who hire at big companies, or the people who are in charge of housing, and that's what I've kind of been
trying
doing.
to do that as well.
Because you can't get everybody a job, and I don't ever give
Well, everybody's
personal
not
people-
going to keep a job either.
Right.
You don't want to waste your.
But there are those people, like
Right.
maybe the guy you're talking about, where like he's doing all the things, but there's just this big block.
Exactly.
And if they're, then you can, because of the network that we're building, we'll have that like, hey, so and so, there's a guy here. This is the facts about his life. Like, do you have any? Because a lot of times they can. Yes, they're going to do a background check, and most of the time it's just going to go, into the trash. But most companies will make exceptions,
Right.
and you just have to find
a person
those-
to advocate.
a person to advocate. And I have found a couple, even in housing, like there's some really good, really bad, but also really good people that work for the housing and that actually want to help people
I need
get
to
into
get with you on that because I'm having an issue with
Well,
that.
housing is such an
particular
housing
thing.
is the main issue dealing with any of these things.
Well, how do we
It's
get a hold
housing.
of landlords? Like we were talking with the guy that runs the Cross Recovery Group. How do we build networks with like property owners so that we could say, hey, like when people are ready,
Yeah.
not like right out, like they just got a felony and now they're getting it, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, how do we get somebody that's really just at the end where they've got old records or they're really doing well positioned so they can get a job and have a place to live? We can do that by building relationships, not just with people who are in recovery or homeless, but also by building relationships with people who are of value in the communities.
Right.
Because they're the ones too. If I rented out houses, I would make the decisions. Now I may have a company standards that say, well, this is what my company stands for, but at the end of the day, it's my company. And I
Well,
can
we
do
need
what I
people.
want.
We need people that understand.
Right.
You
And
know,
there are some. There
yes.
are some out there. We just have to
But
keep finding them
that's
and
right.
getting to know them and
Right.
making ourselves known so that when we have a situation like what you're talking about, we can say, this guy he's not going to play you. He's not going to, we
Right.
can do our best. Now, we don't make any promises because people lose their
Right.
minds and do whatever
Right.
people are going to
Yeah.
do. But,
Right.
And consistency is in short supply.
So-
It blows my mind to drive around West Frankfort and to see 200 vacant homes
we
rotting.
need money.
And
I would buy 'em up.
And then 100, 150 homeless people.
We could buy them up and then have all of the homeless people work on them, pay
Right.
them, and
That's
then live in
awesome.
So
them.
that's
awesome
so in the long term, that's what some of our goals are: is to
Right.
open up some sober living homes and then a
Super
transitional housing
Yeah.
program, and then from that give them housing opportunities.
That's awesome.
You know, as we help change their lives. You bring up a great point with jobs programs. So a lot of times when jobs programs get started, one of the first things that, hey man, are you a felon? Well, man, a lot of people don't realize how close they are to becoming a felon. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
we all commit multiple felonies every day. So easy for somebody to become a felon, and then immediately you're eliminated from a lot of the programs that are designed to help you.
Right.
You know, fighting some of that stigma, advocating for those causes, which is what we're doing, recruiting more people that understand, empowering them to use their voice, empowering people. One of the great things I love about our organization is training people that have come out of substance use and homelessness to turn around and go back and help coach others to come out of that. Is so powerful, you know, developing some of that stuff. I think we are headed in the right direction. We talked about it on the last episode, is that I'm beyond the point of talking about how we're at a crossroads. I really think that we have started down the right path in our community. I think it's been a rough get there.
It's been
And I think well, it's not just so much that, but our community has an interesting dynamic between some of the sober living homes and having a major mental health agency right there, and then so many churches. Our community should not be in the shape it's
Well,
in.
what I would
But-
say to that, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is a lot of people have an intention,
Yeah.
but they don't know where to start. And I think it's really interesting kind of how I came into this. And like you said, this isn't you, this is not me. And I say this sometimes, and it's kind of funny, is I'm the least likely person to be stepping foot in some of the places I go. I
Right.
would never, and that's what I love about it, is I get no glory because this isn't me. I would never do this. God gets all the glory. So how I started out was there was no structure, no, ministry said, why don't we do this? Literally, it was just the Lord himself said, do this. And it started out by me going, okay, I'm willing,
We're gonna get you guys some self-defense classes.
What do you want me to do?
You guys scare me.
Well,
you guys make me nervous.
wait
The
till
first
we-
thing I thought when you messaged me, and I was like, oh my god.
Oh no, it gets better. You
I was
haven't
like,
even heard how it began. It literally began. I would go
You
out
guys are
at
braver than I am.
I would go out at like 5:45 in the morning on my bike. I would put food and cash in my basket of a bike with a basket, like the old-fashioned bike. And I would ride around town. Literally, I'm not joking, going into like dark areas and shouting for people. Like, is anybody in there? Come out. I want to get you breakfast. Like,
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
knew that they used to sleep out back at Centerstone,
Yeah.
right? So I would go out in the parking lot and just yell for people to see if they would come out. And there's such a fear, I caught a guy one day coming out of the park with like a rolled up blanket under his arm, and I rode up to him. It's like 5:50 a.m. It's still dark. And I just ride up to him out of the dark, like, hey. And the terror on his face.
Oh, I bet.
You know, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to reprimand you. I want to help. Did you sleep in the park? And it's like, no, I didn't. All the while carrying a blanket under his arm. But there's such a need for people that, and it's a tricky thing. How do you even go about this? Because most people are not going to go out into an alley or the woods.
And to be clear, we don't want people going out to the alleys and
these
woods.
statements are not represented by Action today.
No. This is what I said. I'm going to get myself in trouble because...
No, it's great.
It's great, man. People need to hear it.
Because
people need to hear that you are doing this when there should be other people that are also doing it with you.
Well, and I don't think by any means I am unique or special and the Lord said, oh, you're so good, let me send you to do this. I think it's people hear it, but they don't act on it necessarily. Right. And that's not to say I listen to his voice better than anybody else either. It's just I made a commitment that, every day to die to myself and not to live for myself. And I took that very seriously. And the thing is, when you make a commitment to him, he takes it real seriously.
Yeah, no kidding.
He's not playing. So if you tell him, I'm willing to lay my life down every day at your feet, he's going to say, all right. And that's exactly what happened. It was like, all right, then don't have any fear. Don't go into this with any expectation, with any idea of what you're even doing.
It's good.
And just go. And that's why, and people all the time are like, are you insane? Like,
maybe.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah, we're
but
still working on that one.
I'm just not afraid, you know?
Yeah.
I have no fear. And it's like, he told me to do this, so I don't have any apprehension about going into a stranger's motel room. As weird as that sounds, I just don't.
I think people get caught up in that everybody that experiences substance use and homelessness is this violent criminal.
Right.
They're not.
And that's not the case. Most of these
not.
people are victims themselves.
They are.
And most of these people are some of the most meek, kind-hearted people in the world.
Yes.
They're just dealing with some major trauma in
Right.
their lives. But you also have to be discerning and be careful
Right.
not to get involved with that guy that just, is out there and is going to hurt you. But also we have to realize that a lot of the time, a lot of the things that we hear about people is their worst moments of their life. And none of us are the worst moments in our life.
Well, and they'll all, almost all of them that I have met, it's almost like, and I pray every day before I go out and do any of this, like, Lord, don't let them see me, let them see you through me. You know what I mean? And it's almost like sometimes they feel that conviction and they'll preface talking to me with, I'm not a bad person. I just, I had a bad day. Like, as that's their statement of why I was in prison. I had a bad day. And it's like, I get it. And that might be true in some of their cases. They really, and some of them it is, they genuinely are decent people. And they had a horrible moment and they got caught in that horrible moment. So that's why I kind of go to the ones that are spotlighted to me, like go to that one and invest your time in them. It doesn't matter if they smell, it doesn't matter if they don't look a certain way that you would be comfortable with. If I show them to you, you go to them. And that's kind of the principle I followed, which is why I have no fear, because I know if he showed them to me and he's pointed them out to me, he's got a plan and there's a purpose. And almost all of them have said that to me. I'm not a bad person. I went through some stuff. I had a bad moment and I went to prison. And it's like, all right, I can work with that. You're acknowledging that you made a mistake. All right. So I have too. I've been down that road. I've not been to prison, but I should have been. I just never got caught,
Right on.
So, there's, I think part of it for me is being, obedient to listen to the Lord's voice. That's not for everybody, but if you are a Christian, definitely don't be a pew sitter. That is a huge thing for me is, again, with the whole Western Christianity thing, it's pew sitting. I'm doing my duty. I'm going once a week, maybe twice a week if you're real holy. And you sit there and it's like a memorial service. You learn what Jesus did 2,000 years ago and you go on your way. Well, he's still very much alive and active, and we're supposed to be also. So if you are going to claim that title, that you follow him, then you have to be willing to die to yourself every moment of every day, not on Sundays and Wednesdays. Every day you get up and you make that commitment. and he's going to show you people that are hurting. That's what he does.
Right.
You know, and it may take you into places that are dirty, that are stinky, that are uncomfortable, but that's what he does. You know, that's when he was alive on the earth, that's where he went, and that's what he's still doing right now. So there's just, I think for me, a call to Christian people, first and foremost, is, you know, that cliche, what would Jesus do? But really, seriously, what would he do? What would he have you to do? And then do it. If he shows you and says, do this, and it's very out of your comfort zone, do it. You know, if you give a cup of cold water in his name, he's going to remember that for eternity.
Right.
And that's my heart every day is, you know, if you did this for the least of these, you did it for me. That's my motivation every
Right.
single day.
I think that we misframe that what would Jesus do as a disciplining measure,
Right, exactly.
when it's really a call to action is what
Exactly.
it is.
It
It's
is.
not I shouldn't do this because Jesus wouldn't do
Right.
it. It's no, I should go do this
Exactly.
because I think that if there's one thing that we can do to encourage people in the community is to take action, to get
Exactly.
involved, to do something.
I
You
have
know,
a little thing. I really like what you're talking about. About a month or two ago, this guy that I'm close with that is homeless and on drugs, you know, friend, really, I was talking to him and he's like, I said, there are so many things out here. Like, I know people that will help if you're ready to get help. And I don't always lead that way, but we've just been in that
Right.
place. And he said, but not everybody's like you.
yeah.
He was
Exactly.
talking to me about getting a haircut at 2 a.m. And how he said, I know you're looking at me crazy because I got my haircut at 2 a.m., but there was a whole line of people waiting to get their haircut at 2 a.m. too. And I said, it is crazy. It's your own reality. I was just having this conversation.
Yeah.
I said, that is nuts. Like, why would you do that? Like, but somebody was out cutting hair at 2 o'clock, and so
Right.
that's what they did, and like that's
was
their
their reality.
normal. And he
Yep.
said, when I don't, he said to me, and it was just like really crazy to me. He said, if I stay here, I'm just living my life. He said, but when I come out, whenever I'm, you know, basically in the day, not everybo's like me or like you. They're faced with shame, and we talked about that earlier. It's not that they're just ashamed. They are. They have their own things going
Yes,
on,
they're
but it's
very-
the dirty looks at the
Yeah,
gas station.
that
It's
stigma.
the stigma. It's the, you know, people being rude or
Right.
people just, you know, being hostile towards them. And, you know, even doing this, getting on the phone with some of these service providers, they are rude.
They are.
Oh my
They're so
gosh.
rude, and I'm like, I can't, like, I am not a, like, I've never been an addict.
Yeah.
I've done drugs, I've done all kinds of things, but I've never really been an addict. So,
Yeah.
like, you have no reason to treat me any way. I can't imagine being a
What it would
person
be
who
like.
experiences all the trauma
And then
gets
not
on the phone with
understand,
you.
and then to have a comprehension issue and not understand to
That
begin
too.
with, and to deal with an attitude like that.
It's bad.
It is. It's very bad, and you see both sides of it. You know,
So-
you realize that these people are well intentioned, have committed their life to helping others, but it seems like sometimes they just end up sliding into that. Well, they have to want it. They really don't want
They
it,
do, and
and so I'm just here to do a job.
I heard someone say once, and it stuck with me, and it probably will always stick with me because it was like a knife into my soul. I heard somebody say, and this is a person who does this as a volunteer thing. I mean, they are doing good things, but they said to me one time, if so-and-so, you know, one of these homeless, addicted people, if they could just clean up the outside,
Yeah.
then God can come in and clean up the inside.
Oh,
And I
God.
thought, I looked at her like, I didn't say a word because I was so shocked. I thought,
That's the
oh,
opposite.
that's so backwards.
Oh, man.
That's so, it hurt me.
I
It
bet-
physically
well,
hurt me.
I felt the same way when I heard somebody that was running a homeless ministry tell me that these people will never change anyway. And I was like, then why are you even doing
Right.
what you're doing? What a great waste of time
Right.
to realize that these people aren't going to change.
Right.
Right.
I mean, why
Well,
would you even do what you're doing?
And I don't mean to sound negative
Yeah.
because, you know, it's kind of like there's a scripture that talks sort of about that. Paul says some people preach because they really want to get the message out, and some because for their own vain reasons, but either way, God's glorified.
Right.
I kind of feel that way about outreach. Sometimes it's genuinely done because the Lord, I think
Yeah.
you're kind of in the same boat. I think he called us both out to do this, just because somebody has to do it, and
Right.
you know, and
You should come. You guys should work together more often.
I didn't know you were doing this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like shocked. This is exactly where I'm at.
See,
I
and this
love
is
it.
what we want our
But-
podcast to do is to change the conversation, bring
Yeah.
people together, and help bring some awareness. So, ladies, I have really enjoyed this conversation.
You were worried about filling up an hour.
No, you were worried about filling
I
up
was
an hour.
not.
You were worried about your hair.
I know. I didn't. I mean, it's like braided because it was a mess, and I thought I would have done it better if I knew I was going to be videoed. This was just a podcast.
Yeah, I should probably start telling people that. I don't
Yeah, I
think
wasn't
people-
expecting cameras.
It's okay. I
But
don't
ladies, I really appreciate your time this morning. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to come in. Even more than that, I really appreciate your heart and what you guys are doing, not only in our community, but I mean, what you're doing creates a ripple that will spread out to our region, you know, and we'll change the world like this. This is how we change the world. It's not through a fancy program, and it's not through a big, not that those things are bad, you know, but through touching people's lives, through connecting with them, through making them feel human again,
Right.
and for letting them realize that people see them,
Right.
you know, that they're not just obsolete,
Right.
you know. And I thank you for your time, ladies.
It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.